Morning, church. I don't usually get to speak to y'all like this, and in fact, my vision is getting bad, so even close, I need to wear my readers and then seeing far as it, so I'll probably be putting these on and off. And my microphones came off. 1 second. You bow your heads with me for just a second here. Heavenly Father, please impart some wisdom to me, just a portion, and speak through me. In your name, amen. So, as my wife stated, I am not a preacher. I do some teaching. In fact, I put the right slides up. They're not of inhaled anesthetics that I lectured on yesterday, although some of you might get some good information out of that. What David Rowe doesn't know is that I gained some inspiration from his talk last week, and it's July, so we're going to continue a little bit forward in this thought on the Declaration of Independence. And yes, I am no great Constantino, but I'll do my best. My family and I moved here. I need to give you some background so you know who I am, because what I'll talk about, you say, well, that's why it's all over the place or whatever else. We moved here over 20 years ago. I did come here for residency. I trained in electrical and computer engineering, so I'm an introvert. I couldn't find a job. I really wanted to design weapon systems, but the Cold War ended, and I was out of a job. I couldn't find a job for a long time. So I went back to Pacific Union College to take my prereqs for medical school, took biology, found out I didn't like biology, and then told medical school I wasn't going to come because I didn't want to study biology. Ultimately, got into medical school, but the most beneficial thing is I met my wife there. She went to dental school a year ahead of me. And then after medical school at Loma Linda, I said, I want to design medical equipment. I don't necessarily want to see patients. And they still let me in to the residency here at University of Utah. As an anesthesiologist, my patients, for most of the time, aren't talking to me. They're asleep. I can handle their stress before surgery, which is very important, right? With not only a few calming words, a few short words, because I'm not one who speaks a lot, and a little bit of Versed or Midazolam. It goes a long ways. But as I continued forward, I did develop medical devices, built some medical device companies, put many devices on the market, which are sold nationally, internationally, so that's my other than day job, so I'm working a lot. But with that comes, I need to be able to translate, so that's what I'm trying to impart to you today. It's like, what do we know? How do I translate that? I'm going to be asking you questions to help you think. I'm not going to have a whole lot of answers for you. That's for you to find as students. So, going forward, as you saw in the announcement, or you may not have, we're going to talk about the intersection of religious and secular life. We'll talk about contentment and peace in a busy, connected world. Some of you are probably on your phones right now and getting texted. And we're going to give some biblical advice from what we learned in the Bible. It was a warm summer day, or spring day in June of 1775. Tom, John, and Ben met together and said, you know what? We're tired, like what Dave said, of King George III. King George III wouldn't listen to any of our grievances, would not respond. And in fact, what he did at the time is he said that all American vessels and cargoes shall be forfeit to the crown. To top it off, the following year, 2 months before the Declaration of Independence, the colonists learned that the king had negotiated treaties with German states to hire mercenaries to fight against the colonists. That was the last straw. The colonies were unhappy, maybe except for New York, who was a little equivocal on this. But that's how we started as a nation. You're going to tell me that this is not who you know as Thomas Jefferson. Who is that? Anybody? Anybody in philosophy? John Locke. Who said that? Excellent. Greg, you should be up here doing this. So wait, what? This is not John Locke? John Locke wrote the treaties of civil government. In fact, the word happiness was not happiness what he wrote, and some say that Thomas Jefferson plagiarized what John Locke wrote. John Locke actually wrote that it was about estate or property, not happiness. But in going through the writing, Ben and John told Tom, look, you need to change this. Or maybe he thought he should change it anyway. But the question then becomes, why did he put happiness in there? Thomas Jefferson was not a poor man. This is Monticello, where his house was. He actually contributed a lot to the Library of Congress. But the question then becomes, when he put happiness in there, what did he mean? And in fact, it's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? It's not happiness. He didn't tell all of us to be happy, but it was a pursuit thereof. We're going to go through some of the data associated with happiness in the United States and around the world. And we're going to look at, what does this mean? How do you know when you're happy? If you're happy, you know it, clap your hands, right? I couldn't find who wrote the song, but we sing it all the time. But how do we know when we're happy? In fact, there was a movie back in 2006 by Will Smith called The Pursuit of Happiness. Have any of you seen this movie? Yeah? A little bit depressing, but it talks about this American dream that Thomas Jefferson maybe meant when he was talking about happiness. Christopher Gardner was an out-of-work salesman in 1981, and that's who Will Smith played. In that movie, he states that, maybe happiness is something that we can only pursue, and maybe we can actually never have it, no matter what. How did he know that? How many of you know who these two individuals are? One Bob and two Bobs. Who are the two Bobs? Who's the Bob on the top? Marley. Who's the Bob on the bottom? McFerrin. Very good. Whenever we go on vacation, my son knows that we like to listen to Bob Marley. And whenever we play that music, we know we're on vacation. But Bob Marley, of course, from Jamaica, wrote a song that my son loves. But within the song, the lyrics are, don't worry about a thing, because every little thing's going to be all right. I almost want to sing it. I'm not a singer. Do you all know what the words are that Bobby McFerrin wrote in his song in 1988 that topped the billboards as a song that was a cappella? What are those words? Don't worry, be happy. Okay. So this is ingrained in our culture about happiness. So what do we do about this? This is the World Report on Happiness in 2019. You can see that all the countries around the world, by color and by smiley faces or not, talk about how happy they are. If you notice at the very top, Finland is happy. It's the happiest. And in fact, they've been the happiest country for the last 7 years. My family and I went to Finland 2 years ago in November. It was dark. The sun really didn't come up. It was depressing. But yet they're the happiest nation in the world. What is it about Finland that makes it so? An article I read said it's about their saunas. It's not saunas. They say saunas. They have like 3.2 million saunas or something like that, and have hardly anybody there. But is there something about saunas? Maybe, maybe not. Let's talk about gross domestic product. Okay, this has come up a lot. This is usually a measurement about how productive we are as a people, especially in the United States. We have the highest GDP, or gross domestic product. But what does that mean for us? If you look at this graph, going from left to right, poor countries to richer countries, and you see the countries kind of moving up on the y-axis, going up on a scale of 0 to 10 of happiness. You have India, you have China, you have Japan, the United States, then you have the Netherlands, at the very top. You can see that as GDP does go up, happiness does increase, okay? But, the issue is that, in the United States, we're $25.4 trillion in GDP. That's a lot of money, right? The other thing you notice in this graph is that the United States, if you look at the orange, means that its upward trend in happiness is moving, its upward trend in terms of happiness is moving in the opposite direction of their GDP. So in other words, just because we're moving up in GDP doesn't mean we're any more happy. In fact, in 1974, Richard Esterlin, an economist, discovered that average life satisfaction in America had stagnated between 1946 and 1970, even though GDP per person had grown 65% over the same period. The thing you should know that before 1990, our GDP was below $5 trillion. And look where we are now. Are we 5 times more happy? So, some of the things that Thomas Jefferson was talking about is the American dream, presumably, maybe, about happiness. And what does that mean for us? We work hard as Americans, but does that necessarily make us happy? When I was in medical school, it was all about competing. Not so much now, but if I didn't get the top scores, whatever, you wouldn't get your top choice of residencies. So it was cutthroat. We wouldn't share with each other very much. We would withhold, not me, but withhold information from each other. Like, I'm not going to tell you what's on the exam. So when we talk about work, there are bad work. So in 1930, one of the most important economists in the 20th century, John Maynard Keynes, imagined that richer societies would become more leisured ones, liberated from toil to enjoy the finer things in life. Yet most people still put in a decent shift. They work hard to afford things that they think will make them happy, only to discover the fruits of their labor sour quickly. The other thing is that they say that we gain rank and we give up free time. Many of us work weekends because sometimes that competitive advantage against people we're competing with at work will put us in a better position for promotion. What about the good things? We know that there's an article came out from CBS that said that the older generation, if you continue to work, they were pretty happier. They're happier than the younger people. I'm thinking about retiring at some point, but then some of my colleagues who have retired sometimes don't fare so well in terms of health. And in fact, Amy Brzezinski from the New York University and her colleagues talked about hospital cleaners, people who clean their rooms, and said that when these hospital workers held patients' hands and kept them company, it brightened their day, as well as getting the room scrubbed. They also noted that hairdressers, instead of just being someone who cut hair, saw themselves as emotional confidants to their customers. Deidre McCloskey, who wrote a book, The Bourgeois Virtues, talks about a Cincinnati sewerman who was interviewed on NPR. And in that interview, he said he'd like to tell girls he was an environmental worker. Got him more dates. Capitalism. Let's talk about capitalism. This country is founded on capitalism, but what does that mean? What does it do for us? Capitalism sometimes means more stuff, okay? But the problem is that stuff that are luxuries become necessities. And then people get stuck on this treadmill trying to get more and more stuff. And then you work really hard to get rid of stuff because your house is too full of stuff. Adam Smith, the Scottish economist and philosopher who was seen as the father of economics or the father of capitalism, said, "How many people ruin themselves by laying out money on trinkets and frivolous utility?" Richard Leonard, the economist in London School of Economics, and Robert Frank wrote a book about luxury fever. And what they said is having a lot of things is not enough if other people have more. Think about that. Is that true? Mark Manson's book, he states, and I'll read this to you. "We joke online about first world problems, but we really have become victims of our own success. Stress-related health issues, anxiety disorders, cases of depression have skyrocketed," I see this with my patients, "and over the last 30 years, despite the fact that everyone has a flat-screen TV, can have groceries delivered to their house. Our crisis is no longer material. It's existential. It's spiritual. We have so much stuff and so many opportunities that we don't even know what to care about anymore." The Bible says from Philippians 4:11-13, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content with whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him that strengthens. Years ago, and Simon was about this age, I have this tendency, especially right now, I got to do it tomorrow, to work on my taxes. So I kind of like put them out toward the end of the year. And it's just a lot of work. It stresses me out. And Simon one day came to me and said, Daddy, you know what? And I think he was like 7 when he said this to me. He said, Daddy, you know what? It's like, what? You need to learn to be happy like right now. I'm like, he's 7 years old and he told me that. But he was right? Don't worry. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And I would add that, therefore, do not let your mind worry, because sometimes your mind keeps going. I don't know about you sometimes. How many of you lay awake at night and your mind's going, you can't go to sleep? And how many of you like wake up in the middle of the night and think you can go back to sleep, it's 3 a.m., you know you need to go back to sleep, but you don't. Yeah, that happens, right? Meaning and happiness. How many of you know who these guys are? You two. Do you know what album this is? Joshua Tree. And What I'm Looking For, the song. It's interesting, and I was thinking, I don't know, who's the worship corner? Is it Dave or whoever it is? We should have a band up here play this song. My wife told me I should play. I wanted to play it here in church. She's like, no, you can't play it. It's not a Sabbath song. But if you look at the third verse, I believe in the kingdom come when all the colors will bleed into one. But yes, I'm still running. You broke the bonds and you loosed the chains, carry the cross of my shame. You know I believe it, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Have you noticed these lyrics in the song? I used to listen to 1987 or 88 when this came out. It's fascinating. America's Pursuit. How many of you know who Viktor Frankl is? Okay. Viktor Frankl wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning. Now, Viktor Frankl, you should know, was born in 1905. He was a neurologist and a psychiatrist, and he survived the Holocaust. He was in Auschwitz. During that time, he lost his parents, his brother, and his pregnant wife. They all died. He almost died as well. This is an excellent book. I highly recommend you read it. During this time in camp, he was able to stay alive because of his purpose in life. He thought about his wife a lot. He even tried to continue some of his psychological thought in what he was going through, even though he was on death's door. It's pretty amazing. He's a pretty amazing scientist. He says it's interesting because to the European, and I'll read this, it is characteristic of the American culture that again and again, one is commanded and ordered to be happy. We're in election season, be happy, right? The other thing is that he says is, but happiness cannot be pursued. And I'm quoting him now. It must ensue. One must have a reason to be happy. Once the reason is found, however, one becomes happy automatically. As we see, a human is not one in pursuit of happiness, but rather in search of reason to become happy. Last but not least, through actualizing a potential, meaning inherent and dormant in a given situation. Once an individual's search for meaning is successful, it not only renders him happy, but also gives him the capability to cope with suffering. He gives us an example. He says it's this need for a reason is similar to another specifically human phenomenon, laughter. If you want anyone to laugh, you have to provide him with a reason to laugh. You have to tell him a joke. In no way is it possible to evoke real laughter by urging him or having him urge himself to laugh. Doing so would be the same as urging people pose in front of the camera to say cheese, only to find that the finished photographs, their faces, are frozen in artificial smiles. Now, you know my wife takes a lot of pictures. And it's like I'm going to eat. She's like, wait, I got to take a picture of the food. And then you'll see on some of her posts on fans like, I'm hungry, right? I want to eat, but she wants to take a picture of me and my food. This is what Dr. Viktor Frankl's talking about. Purpose and fulfillment. From Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And from Mark 12:30-31, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. So these are purposes that we can incorporate to our life that are eternal and long-lasting. As we go through our lives with some of the superficialities, the things that we go through and we're doing, we need to remember who we are and where we're going. If we can't do that, happiness will always be elusive, as Will Smith said. As I lecture and I give lectures, I always want to finish sooner than expected. We're at the end. But in summary, I didn't put anything up there. I understand going through some of the hardship. Medical school really beat me up. And sorry for Micah Chai here if he's going to engineering. It was super hard. It was really hard. And then I went to medical school. It was hard not to have a job for 3 years. Could not find a job. And then the weird thing is the internet came out right about that time, but I missed that one. So now I'm studying artificial intelligence because I don't want to miss that boat. So I'm studying on weekends and nights for that too. Competitive. Residency, medical school was competitive. We mentally fought against each other for rank, for position. And economics, money makes the world go round. I learned that in my position as administrator. I'm also administrator for the South Jordan Health Center and all its surrounding clinics. It's about money. I was in debt when I came out of medical school. Didn't have any money hardly to pay back. And in my device development, I also learned that money makes the world go round. But the meaning and purpose that we can take from some of these biblical verses we've seen today can carry us through. And I know that each of you today, as you think about what God has said through me, this can make an impact positively. Thank you.